halfway down the page, it says 30,000, should be 300,000.
On
Page 2, sorry.
2. Okay, I'm missing it. Oh, I see, on 2. It should be 30,000?
No, it should be 300,000.
300,000. Okay, thank you. Page 2, page 4. Okay. Any other corrections, additions, deletions?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say sign. Okay, that item is off the agenda. Next item on the agenda is conditional use permit request, commercial storage and banquet and reception hall in the agricultural estate zoning district parcel number 8946293000011. Do you want to make introductions to this item?
Yes, David Gleiser, Community Economic Development Director. This application is submitted by Roy and Melanie Olson. Their address is 1473 Buchanan Avenue, Sioux City, Iowa, 51106. The property information or the application is for the adjacent property that they own, parcel number 894629300011, which is a 4.77 acre parcel. And as you mentioned, it's in the Ag Estate zoning district. The applicants are seeking a conditional use permit because their current zoning district does not include allowed uses for banquets and reception halls and commercial storage. To provide you a little bit of background on this case here, back in November of 2015, Roy Olson applied for a building permit to construct a storage building on the 4.77 acre parcel. The application indicated the building would be used for storage equipment and cars, and the permit was received by Peggy Napier, and Director John Palello approved it. As you can see in the original building permit, the site plan shows the applicant's house on an adjacent parcel, which is addressed at 1473 Buchanan Avenue, and the site plan shows the home's well and septic system are located on that parcel. Our current zoning ordinance does cite that no accessory building shall be constructed upon a lot until the construction of the principal building is commenced. So technically, with that being in mind, the new accessory structure should have been built either on the house parcel, or the two parcels should have been combined. So technically speaking, the way that the accessory structure sits without a principal structure is in violation of the ordinance. I'm not sure if that was ever addressed prior to this, but it is something that we noticed in our review. The new structure, or I guess I'll just call it the new parcel, or the new accessory structure parcel, does share a drive with the adjacent property owners, Richard and Catherine Kingston. Their address is 1487 Buchanan Avenue, and this shared drive is the Kingstons' only drive to their home. In late December, when Director Palello was on medical leave, he had received a voicemail from Mr. Olson requesting some information or requesting a second drive on his house parcel. John forwarded that request to Mark Nara, the county engineer, and myself. Subsequently, Mr. Olson was informed by the county engineer that the secondary roads policy does require a minimum 10 acres for a second drive to be granted. In January of 2018, the Woodbury assessors performed a site visit on the new accessory building parcel and discovered the facility was built for purposes beyond the original disclosure in the original building permit. The assessor staff informed myself and Dan Priestley that there was a large home with numerous garage doors had been built, and there was a vineyard planted. So Dan and I received a tour on January 5th from Mr. and Mrs. Olson, and they informed us of their intended uses for the facility, which included a range of different purposes, which did include commercial personal storage, a bed and breakfast, a winery, and events facility. At that time, we did inform them that the bed and breakfasts are allowed in all zoning districts under the current ordinance. However, the personal storage and the events facilities are not allowed uses in that zoning district. We did inform them that the winery may be an allowed use under the ag exemption, but we wanted to do a little bit more research on Iowa wineries and how those are regulated. So during that site visit, the Olsons communicated to us that they wanted a second drive on their house parcel, so it could connect to their new accessory structure parcel and sort of create a half moon or a half loop throughout both properties. And at that time, it was suggested that if they combine the two parcels, that would give them enough acreage to meet the secondary roads policy for a second drive. And so that could be something that the assessor might be able to facilitate, but that determination would need to be made by the assessor's office. So we left that site visit, gave the folks some information related to the conditional use permit. We explained that, you know, if the vineyard activity is allowed under the ag exemption, that those activities would be allowed and there wouldn't be an issue. But as it relates to the commercial personal storage and as well as hosting events outside of the scope of the agricultural activity or the vineyard, such as weddings or receptions, that the neighborhood really is entitled to the right to have a say on whether or not that is going to be allowed through a conditional use permit process. We did suggest that they contact Siouxland District Health and the DNR to discuss their well and septic situation. Just sort of based on the information we had at that time, it seemed like it could be likely that the DNR might classify their use as a public water supply, just based on the number of people that would be at the facility throughout a given year. So it was suggested that they come to the courthouse and meet with staff along with the assessor's office and sort of come with all of their ideas or future intended uses so we could really start to sort out what would be the most appropriate action to take as far as getting this done under the scope of the ordinance. So on February 15th, the Deputy Assessor Scott Clausen, Dan and myself and the Olsons, we had a meeting on the 6th floor. They brought in aerial photos of the property that indicated where the current and future vineyard would be located. And Scott Clausen told them that based on planning a certain number of acres for the vineyard, that their office would then be able to assess the house parcel as agricultural rather than residential, which would change their property tax rate for their house parcel. And then as long as that same activity was consistent with the new structure parcel, then they would be able to adjoin them. So the assessor's requirements in order to combine a parcel is that both parcels are zoned the same and that the primary use for the parcels are the same. So they wouldn't allow a residential parcel to be combined with an agricultural parcel, or if there was commercial activity, or if it was going to be rezoned. So they want to make sure that that the use is the same, and they said Scott indicated that he would be valuing it, the new structure, as agricultural, because they've indicated that that's where they're going to be storing their grapes before they're sent off to be processed into wine. So again, we indicated that they would need to reach out to Siouxland District Health and get the well and septic situation figured out. It is important to note that currently we do not allow structures to have their well and septic systems be located on a different parcel other than what that the property that it would be supplying or, you know, serving. So, as far as it relates to the ability to combine them, it seemed like there was likelihood that there's potential for that to be combined. And so whether or not they would be able to tap into their home, well and septic systems, you know, those issues are sort of outside of our wheelhouse. We don't make those determinations. But I guess, you know, we did indicate that it seemed like we would not have a problem under the ag exemption to allow the vineyard and the vineyard activities to be allowed uses. So really it was just getting a grasp on the commercial activity as it relates to, you know, the storage and the events facilities. So other than that, I would allow or invite the applicants up, and if you folks would like to go through your application with the commission.
Melanie Olson. We're kind of a team, so. So, yeah, you got your microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess 1473 Buchanan Avenue, obviously. I guess what questions do you have for us, or?
Just give us your background information on, you know, whole concept of these and the hurdles you have, and you see
Okay.
trying to work with the DNR and the well and
No.
septic system being an issue, and what about the potential for growth, and then, you know,
Okay.
what are your plans?
Okay. Okay. Even as far, like, we are planting more vines on May 5th, and it was our understanding from the assessor that once we have those planted, that we will be able to switch to agriculture for that parcel, and then we would be able to combine the two parcels. So that's our understanding of that. Roy has talked with Julie and Ron.
Julie from the DNR about the well situation.
And you know, we feel everything is very doable. He's a contractor, so we're going to make anything happen that needs to happen. The commercial storage part, our plan for that is it's heated, what would you say, climate controlled.
Climate controlled. Mhm.
So you could have 2 Corvettes end to end, and that's really was our plan for that. It's discreet. It's someplace where you know, where they can park, that people aren't going to see that they have that. They could potentially have their meetings at our facility, that kind of thing. It's a special place. We've lived there 29 years, and we've been trying to figure out this whole time, kind of off and on, you know, what do we do here? We love it. It's we're both from Sioux City. We're high school sweethearts. We're you know we're committed to this community, and where we live is so beautiful that it's kind of a little place where people don't realize it's so special. And I mean, you stopped by for a site visit today, and I think you experienced that. You step out and it's special. You know, I think you've been over, Tom, you know, sometime in the last bit, you know, and it's, we've kept it to ourselves for a long time, and having this building there and the vineyard, and the view and the pond, it's so peaceful, and that's what we want to share with people. It's not, oh, let's go party. It's, you know, we want people to go, oh, this is restful, this is peaceful. You know, I have a woman who is a life coach that contacted me through a mutual friend who sees this as a place to have retreats. They have quarterly retreats, her and her daughter, who's a marriage counselor. And they came out, her and her husband came out on Saturday, and they just were like, this is just the perfect place. They have like 15 to 20 people at these events, and they're like from 8:30 to 2 is what she told me. And they they have catering lunch, and it's just this little group of people that, and that's the kind of groups that we envision. It's not a wedding with 100 people or 250 people or anything like that. It's these little groups of people that need a special place that is just not Perkins' little back room or,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So something, right, something with atmosphere, because we're also we've traveled around the country and picked up, I mean, he's a contractor, we love architecture like this place. So we've picked up doors and windows from all around the country, and we have doors, we didn't go to Scotland, but we have doors from Scotland that are going to be in the bed and breakfast area, and it's just going to be a special place. And there's how many windows across the back? 5?
5.
They're 100-year-old windows that each of them has 20 panes, or
20
anyway.
panes. Mhm.
I took out each pane of glass and restored those windows because we want that old glass, and we want the wavy look, and we want it to be a special place, and this is what we've envisioned. The bed and breakfast part of it is just 2 rooms. I don't know if I'm assuming you have the email that I sent to Michelle, just really explaining, that we also have a bedroom in our home that has a separate bathroom that we will add to the bed and breakfast, and to make that work. And it's just, as we've traveled and stayed in bed and breakfast, staying at a place like what our house is just so special that we would love to be able to do that. And I guess Sioux City doesn't have that kind of thing, and that's, I guess, what we want to be is an ambassador to Sioux City, Woodbury County, Iowa, and that's what we see this too with the vineyard and the Iowa wine. It's like loving the Loess Hills, and it's loving Iowa and just sharing who we are, I guess, as Iowans too. So, if that's
Particularly interested in the well and the septic.
Of course.
I love your background.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
a great vision.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Actually, I guess just some comments from different people that I've heard on the issue. Number one, I think some of the assumption is that the events are big events. And to me,
Yeah.
I mean, 25 or less or in that neighborhood, probably, during primarily the summertime, not necessarily limited to that, but,
Right.
and not every weekend all the time.
No, and actually, I'm hoping to, have, I guess, things during the week.
Well, I guess what I was
during
kind of
the-
getting at
Or
is
what
that,
the concerns.
maybe on a weekly basis, once a week, the comment with county engineer with the bus to be able
Oh.
to turn around. I don't
We don't
foresee
want a
that
bus.
somebody's
No.
gonna, no, I mean, if
Yeah.
it's 25 or less, nobody's
Right.
probably gonna charter a bus to bring in
Yes.
25 people
You're right.
to an event when half of them drive
Right.
there. I mean, I
Right.
guess
Mm-hmm.
the clarity on the type of events that you're having, and like you said, they're smaller, they're not large scale.
Right, yeah,
I know the area real well.
you do.
The site itself isn't really even that noticeable from the road if you're not paying
And
attention.
we're fairly hidden.
So
Yeah.
it's,
Mhm.
I guess that's all, I just was trying to clarify a little bit of that on when you say event,
It's
it's,
broad,
yeah.
yes,
So
yeah.
I think people were thinking 150, 200 people.
Well, that,
It's not
Yeah.
gonna facilitate that.
Yeah.
large
no,
event.
no. And
When we started out, we called it an activity room, because we just really didn't want to say event center. I mean,
That sounds-
immediately you think of 100 plus. I mean, the building's not that big. So,
we don't want that many.
now, with that said, we had my mother's 89th birthday there a couple of weeks ago, and it was a surprise birthday party, so everyone parked behind the building. So when she drove up, she had no idea this was going to happen. And so there ended up being 29 people there, and nobody knew anybody was even there because all the cars were hidden behind the building. And you know, and it went well. It can certainly hold 29 comfortably, so that's the event size we're hoping for, you know, 30 to 50.
And like I said in that
So-
email, it's more the prenuptial dinner and the opening gifts rather than the wedding, you know.
Yeah.
that
And
to me,
anymore, who
that's-
has a wedding of 100 people? I mean,
They're all out at country celebrations for 400 people,
Yeah.
you know, so, yeah.
But it makes a niche market for you too.
Well, it does, yeah,
Going where you get 400 people, like,
Exactly.
as you said,
right,
you want something more private and intimate.
exactly,
Relocation.
exactly.
right, yeah, we're not out to compete with country celebrations
They're
at
a great
all.
facility, and they're
Yes.
awesome people, so.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So water and septic is going to be, you're going to use your primary.
We're going to use our primary well, yes, for water, and it'll have its own septic system, separate from the house.
And DNR Julie Severs, has she signed up on that yet?
She's sending the paperwork from Des Moines to get it all rolling.
We haven't received it.
We haven't received that yet, and I understand there'll be testing involved. They'll test for nitrates to make sure the water's fine, and then if there is some, what steps we'll have to take to treat the water so that it's up to snuff for people. So
As far as the parcels themselves, it's your intent to marry them together? if-
yes.
Yeah.
That, that question actually came up back when I did pull the permit originally. You know, John Puello and me have a special relationship. I mean, I trimmed his house 10 years ago, whatever. You know, so we talked, not official, several times. And the talk came up about, you know, that we have 2 parcels. And I asked him then, should we, you know, would be a benefit to join them? And he's like, you know, at the time, I said, well, you can, but there really wasn't an advantage at that point. So it was discussed, but, you know, I never acted on it because I didn't feel we needed to.
And
But-
at that time, that would have been allowed, is that correct? Because the use was the
Oh,
same?
would have changed then?
No, so, you know, and I don't know how that one slipped past, but, because it's clear as day in the ordinance that you cannot have an accessory structure. You cannot start building an accessory structure until the building of the primary, building has commenced.
How does that apply, though, if you have, say you had 2 40-acre parcels and the house is on one and the building would be on the other? Would that still limit your ability to put?
Well, under an ag exemption.
But if it wasn't ag, would that still apply then? If you had 80 acres, you couldn't build the house on the 140 and the building on the
Yeah,
adjoining? Okay.
yeah. I mean,
So a
so.
lot of examples of it, like you're saying.
That's kind of what I'm wondering, how that, I mean, it's
And
just,
that's what, it's designed that way so that we just don't have these random storage buildings out in the county. So, I mean, I think that's.
and in this situation, it was just odd that it was 2 parcels instead of 1.
It was, you know, and until I came down to get the permit, I didn't even realize how the parcels were. And with that said, when we did pull the permit, the only thing they really wanted to make sure is that the new building fit on the smaller parcel. She didn't want me to encroaching onto the other parcel, so we physically did move it slightly, so it did meet that requirement. So,
Chicken coop was on both, is that?
right, we tore down a chicken coop that used to be there, which was on both parcels. So,
It was something that it was just like, oh, kind of noticed it, you know, during the review of all this information. It's really sort of, to me, it's not that big of an issue because there's a pathway to get out of it.
mhm.
That's kind of what I was
Yeah.
wondering. So if they could be married together, then it's also going to eliminate, or help with the issue on the driveway
Exactly, yes.
also.
Yeah.
But I would say that, you know, during our initial meeting, when we were all together on the 6th floor, Scott was telling us what he believed, what could happen as far as, you know, once you get planning. But it seems that, based off of information that I've heard from the assessor's office now, and Dan, you might be able to speak to this better, but that Julie Connolly, the assessor, has the, you know, the ultimate determination on when she believes that the primary uses are the same. And I don't think that it's
Yeah.
what Julie does is she'll monitor the situation, monitor the activity on both parcels. So she'll look at where you're going towards the vineyard in terms of planting, and then the activity involved with what you do with the crop. And so, for example, the current one that you have, the storage building, would meet the requirement for harvesting, putting it in there for the storage. So she looks at usage as a way to change that classification over.
So is, I guess, if you could, I'm sorry about asking too many questions, but it's basically like a reverse subdivision. They're not subdividing, they're putting them back together. We would determine whether it could be subdivided, not the assessor's office, correct?
Right.
So in the reverse of that, other than for taxation purposes, does the assessor have that final say that it can't be married back together? So we subdivide, but they would be the ones that would determine. We don't have any input in marrying them together.
Yeah, we have no
Okay.
authority over
Okay,
that.
that's kind of, I just wanted to verify that, so.
So, and then the other issues, I think that are, you know, as it relates to the bed and breakfast, what Michelle Clausen at Siouxland District Health has told us is that the Iowa code says that, the bed and breakfast has to be under one roof of where the kitchen, where the food is gonna be cooked, it's gotta be under one roof. And from the emails that she sent, you know, it, basically she's saying you guys are gonna have to apply for a hotel license, which seems silly to have a two-bedroom hotel, but under Iowa code, that's what the statute says. And so, you know, that's.
Yeah, that's a hurdle that we have no,
So, I mean, that would probably be a condition if the commission wanted to, you know, look at approving that use for the bed and breakfast would be that, you know, all applicable state and federal, you know, licenses are.
we typically, we do that with any conditional use permit anyhow. We require that they meet all requirements, so.
You can have a conditional use permit and still not be able to do the other things, so.
I guess that's kind of what I was trying to point out, that even if it's approved through Board of Adjustment, there's another hurdle that,
Right.
We know
Yeah.
there's lots of, we're not done.
Yeah, and, you know, as far as the well and septic, you know, from what the email that I've seen from Julie, she said that she indicated that Roy has indicated that they are gonna need to be a public water supply. So as that relates to their home well and whatever, I guess at this point, we have not heard what would need to happen with that. I just know from other wells that have been drilled without permits getting pulled and stuff, that the public water supply is a higher, more stringent requirements. It's
Has to be tested annually.
yeah, and the same thing on the commercial septic system or whatever, and, you know, that's the biggest concern when Siouxland District Health said, like, ooh, they definitely don't wanna be pumping all of that into their home septic system, because it's probably not designed to handle that sort of capacity.
It would not be able to
Yep.
It's separate already.
And it's two different levels anyway, so that would,
So
not
it's-
an option.
That would be another something, you know, in terms of a condition that the commission would consider is something, you know, to make sure that those,
and there's nothing in zoning requirements that would disallow them from having a separate septic on an accessory structure. Okay, so that's not
no,
an issue.
that's not an issue.
Okay.
no.
There's things like that we have to watch out for because this conflicts with federal or state.
Well,
You know, and-
right, but I didn't know if there was something that was above and beyond where an accessory structure can't have its own
No,
septic,
Just as
so.
long as it meets you know, the separation requirement from the home, or from the, you know, the property and, yeah, so, and I guess, you know, besides, those are sort of the issues that jumped out the most, and then the parking, I don't know, the parking as it's currently on two separate parcels. So I think what would happen is things would have to have to happen in a sequence, you know, where parcels combine first, which would then allow for the second drive, which would then allow for the classifications, which would then allow for, I know it's your property, so I wouldn't be able to park on your property.
Right.
But that sort of stuff, as far as a site plan, and, you know, I think it just, and then besides that, you know, subject to whatever sort of public testimony that the commission or the board may hear, as it relates to neighbors or, you know, concerns, those would be my biggest.
I guess, and that's, as long as you mentioned that, where Kathy Kingston had written in, and I assume if this is allowed, it's not going to affect zoning, theirs at all. It was one of her Kathy's concerns. It's not going to impact their zoning at all. And,
They do share a drive, so I mean, hypothetically, that's probably the impact for them is.
Right, but the specific ones that they're concerned with didn't even mention the drive, so that's what I'm getting at. It won't affect their zoning. The taxes aren't going to be impacted by this, and there's nothing to do with annexation. No, you don't have to sign an annexation agreement or anything either. So, no, but that's what I'm saying.
I think town's going that way, away from us.
The three concerns that she addressed in this letter are mute because it's not going to impact it at all. They're legitimate concerns, but they can be answered that no, it's not going to have an impact on any of those three in a negative sense. So I guess just to get that out of the way too.
So I guess I do have one concern, and it's not a large one, and I guess it's probably something you already thought about, but you know, once you join these properties, it probably won't be the ability to unjoin them or sell one off from the other. So you know, down the road, it becomes part of the estate and all that good stuff, and it's probably gonna have to stay one forever. So just so you realize that there won't be a way to break it back up and say the house goes one way and the business goes the other.
No.
Okay.
That'll become our heirs' problem.
Whoever they are.
Whoever they may be.
Yeah, how many times do we hear that?
Thanks, Uncle Roy.
But you don't have children, so
Yeah.
the arrows was kind of,
Yeah.
So how many acres are there together with both?
Well,
under 15.
Just under 15 with the two.
the one parcel's 9.5, yeah.
Yeah, their home parcel, their house parcel, is just shy of 10 acres.
Okay.
So if we would have had 10, we could have done the other drive.
So yeah, so if you've been there, if you've seen the pictures, you know, Mrs. Olson, right, it's very beautiful property. It would be a nice amenity to have the vineyard in Woodbury County. And as long as it's, you know, I think, okay with the neighbor, I mean, technically the vineyard activities are gonna be an allowed use under ag exemption. So I mean, I think that's really exciting. And then as long as, these other activities can be managed, within reason and, meet your requirements, I don't think we have, any specific issues in that particular class.
Yeah, and I think one of the other concerns that was brought up was the increased traffic, but I mean, there's two churches on that road currently with, you know, especially the one to the south is a fair number of cars. And actually, I'm on that road every day. The Cornerstone causes more of a traffic issue than either of the other two churches do, so.
I think the biggest concern would to not have traffic from these events being on Park on Buchanan.
Right.
I think if and when that happens, that's gonna probably put, some serious,
Or you start making things from you.
Yeah, and I don't foresee, I don't, what is your parking capacity down there?
I did a little map and with the, like 10 by 20 spaces, it come up with 65 spaces to
I was gonna say, there's probably.
I re-terraced the property
you're
to
talking
handle additional
parking. If you're talking
Yeah.
25 people, you're probably only talking 10 cars or.
Yeah, I mean, that many can park on our concrete that we
So
have
that's-
poured, so.
I guess I don't see, and you don't want them on Buchanan anyhow, it's a
No.
safety
No,
issue.
no, no. Yes. You deal with them as they come up.
Do we have any questions? Michelle, are you ready to meet?
Do you want to go through each one step by step, meet the conditions?
That would
Just
be
as a-
helpful. I
That would
think
be
that,
helpful? Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to or if you,
So I think it would be probably logical if we just started with the parcel combination.
Okay. Okay, I got all the stuff ones. Criteria one, and then it's criteria two. You want to read them off? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I guess I have some in my head, I'm not.
Okay. Oh, well, you know,
Is there a page
yeah,
number you're looking at or
business don't.
I'm looking at 31.
Okay.
You're looking at 21?
So I'm hearing that we're gonna recommend a conditional use permit to the Board of Adjustment based on the following conditions, is that what you're, okay?
And Dan, help me out here too if I'm forgetting something, but I'm just, the ones that are in my head are, would be to start off with the parcel combination. And that'd be through the assessor's office. You don't have to worry about the, okay, so then the bed and breakfast, that that we either have, verification on their proposal to use their home, kitchen, and the bedroom. I don't know how that's gonna work, but
She doesn't,
if it doesn't work, because I think what she said is I gotta check.
Mhm.
So Siouxland District Health said that they would check to see if their proposal to use a room in their house, and consider the rooms in the accessory structure to be okay. If we get verification, they say, yeah, that's okay, then there's really no issue, but if it's not, and the bed and breakfast, the kitchen has to be under the same roof, then that's not gonna work, and technically it meets the definition to be licensed as a hotel.
so we can address that issue just basically with our condition that it meets
So that just
the,
gets
well,
standards.
the permits and requirements of all applicable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going to address that by making that broad statement that all or permits and requirements from,
Some of those details, I see the Board of Adjustment probably.
they may have to dwell into it further, but in the past, that's kind of how we've
Okay,
addressed that.
okay, okay.
The-
Statement to make sure you meet.
We would make the recommendation based on the fact that all applicable permits are acquired and conditions are met.
Alcohol,
In the
food.
event that.
Because then that way, because they have to go through different,
Right.
instead of us requiring a specific thing, it just means that they get the permits that are required and it's approved.
And sort of like, I guess I looked at this project as kind of like the DeRocher's, horse arena.
I think we did the same thing on that it just, they had to qualify and meet all applicable
So if we-
state
if you guys
and,
want to keep it broad like that, and then we can pin it down.
Pin it down to the Board of Adjustment,
Okay.
needs that pin down.
Okay.
They're the ones that are gonna put probably a lot of it. And
yeah,
they're
they'll
gonna
put the
have-
conditions labeled in exactly, but like I said, if that statement's in there,
Okay.
that would allow for them to do whatever they need to do and meet those conditions.
Yeah, if everybody else is okay
Is
with that.
that,
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay, that's fine.
And then I would say probably, which is pretty commonsensical, or maybe you can just make the assumption that all other zoning ordinances would need to be met as far as, the parking space requirement, other sort of setback like on the wall, signage. We had discussed, when we initially went to a site visit, that the commission may consider other things to help prevent, to provide like a barrier, a site barrier, and I don't know if you guys want to impose anything like that. Because I do think the residents, the building looks like a residence. soon. So I think driving by, that you don't really get the impression that there's commercial activity taking place. So those would be the only other things I could come up with.
That's something I think you probably, because we usually say with whatever conditions the board of adjustment wants to apply, we're not gonna tie their hands in any way.
Okay.
Um,
Right, and that's part of the reason doing, because generally we don't get the people at this meeting that are maybe against it or have a comment that they would like to make. So the Board of Adjustment's gonna hear those from somebody, and then at that time, maybe it's a condition that's simple to solve that
Gotcha.
you can,
So then maybe subject to public testimony or whatever.
Yeah, always.
Okay.
and like I said in the past, it's basically been according to state and local ordinance and permits, and then with any other conditions that may be brought up at the Board of Adjustments meeting.
Or, and then it goes to the supervisors, they have the same ability, because they know we don't like the idea. So we'll just,
And that's kind of where you come into where, the criteria can be met under certain circumstances on each one. If that's,
everybody's okay with that. It's just approving this now, so it can go forward to board of adjustment, and you can do your analysis and have any conditions that they want to at this point.
Can I talk about signage? Do you have any ideas of how you're going to advertise it? Do we have any conditions on that?
There are limitations as far as signage goes, so
So
within the
not-
limitations of that zoning district.
and those are within the zoning district, or the ordinances would spell out what they can and can't do for signage.
Same with lighting.
So that'll be, that's automatic in that district, that
Okay.
Well,
placement,
I guess
size.
I'm just thinking here as far as because we don't necessarily have, Dan, can you pull up the?
The ordinance
Yeah,
here.
I think if you had a blanket statement that, all other ordinances are adhered to,
It's an umbrella.
then that would.
Would include that, too.
Yeah, it's an umbrella. We don't need to go into those details right now. It is what it is with this.
And the location's gonna be determined whether, I'm assuming it's gonna have to be on their property, because
Well,
county's
if they
not
wanted
gonna
one
allow
on-
a small one up on Buchanan.
They're gonna have to, abide by the county.
County engineers, he'll say, yes, you can put it there, no, you can't.
One on
or-
Highway 20 and go through the DOT.
And that, there again, that's gonna fall back on all state and local ordinances are followed, so. And I think you have a square footage
Yeah.
in there for how large it can be in the ordinances anyhow, so.
Any other questions or go at this time?
Nope, I just wanted to mention it.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
You have any other?
Alright, so are we ready to make that motion then?
You make it, you do that really well.
Okay. I would make the motion that we recommend to Board of Adjustment that with the conditions that we've discussed, state and local ordinances be followed. Other conditions that may be heard from the public at the Board of Adjustments public meeting, that we would recommend the approval of the conditional use permit if those conditions at that meeting are met, or any other additional conditions that they may feel need.
And spell out the conditional use that we're actually, okay, is it just for the B and B?
Well, no,
Just
the
the
conditional use they're applying for is for the
Just-
commercial storage,
The commercial
B
storage,
and B,
just the commercial.
and the winery.
Right.
And the winery, actually, they don't have to
Well,
apply
actually,
for it.
the
That's not a
B&B is-
condition.
The B and B is good, because it's actually allowed under all zoning districts. It just has to meet that state code definition.
So actually, the commercial storage is the only one we're dealing with, because the winery is ag, the event center and the,
Events.
Yeah, any event outside of the winery, the vineyard activity. So like-
what about the commercial storage for vehicles?
And that.
Those two
Those
things.
two.
Those are the two that are gonna apply. That's what the conditional use permit's being applied for. The winery actually will fall under ag exempt. so that's not a conditional use.
Okay, then I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Go on to the Board of Adjustments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Good luck.
One comment I guess I would make too, I don't know if you've talked to anybody that does have an issue, but,
I talked to Kingston's, Rick, like, he actually, those questions that you have.
Okay, that's what it-
That's what he was worried
They
about.
emailed that to us.
Oh, did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
he
he-
came over, right after he got the letter and was concerned about what might happen to his property because of what we were doing. He was afraid his zoning was gonna change. I'm like,
Yeah,
I
I-
don't think so, but.
He did also indicate that Joe Christie had said things about parking on.
Yeah.
And-
That kind of thing, but-
I guess that's what I was getting at, is if a discussion or a conversation is held with the individuals prior to the Board of Adjustment meeting, you might not even have them show up at the meeting.
Yeah,
It might be resolved
yeah.
prior to the meeting
So
taking
We
place.
had another neighbor show up, Arnie Fleck, who lives behind us, which is pretty unusual because we've lived there 29 years and I've never met the man, and I'm neighbors to him. And so we weren't quite sure what his questions were going to be, but he wanted to know when the bed and breakfast was going to be operational because he could use it.
Okay,
So yeah, we didn't get much negativity.
okay.
But keep
that's
in mind,
good
this
advice.
has been going on for 2 years,
Yeah.
so all the neighbors fully know what
Well,
we're
they
trying to
might
do.
not fully know. if-
Well, I mean,
But that's what I'm getting at, just a simple conversation may appease
Yeah.
a concern they have, so.
I just, one more question, since we'll be planting, another half acre, May 5th, does our other parcel then qualify to be joined at that point?
I would, just to kind of help your case along, I would stay in contact with Julie Conley, the assessor, and let her
Okay.
know which stages you're on, because she will be following up with you anyhow on
Okay.
that status, but the
'Cause it
more
was-
she knows, and
Because at one point, for some reason, I felt like they couldn't do anything until next year.
I think it's just when they were going to actually.
yeah, I would just kind of keep those status updates,
Yeah.
because she said that's what she's really gonna be watching for, is where
Okay.
they're at.
Right.
Because the ag, value will actually probably give you a lower taxable value, the tax rate than residential rate.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
That's okay, because you're gonna pay hotel tax.
I know, yeah, it just trades one thing.
And
for
if
another.
anybody argues that that's gonna lower, or raise their taxes because you're gonna pay less, say, yeah, but I'm paying more on the building.
There you
Yeah.
go, yes, you're very right. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Okay. The last time we made, several things, staff update, number 4. You want staff update?
Okay, you might recall last month, we had the gentleman, Jim Williams, attend our meeting, and he talked about the wind energy, the consumer-based turbines. And we've done some preliminary research this month, and we found some guidance out there from the Department of Energy. And one of the classifications in terms of these different turbines, the small-scale turbines, they mentioned that a lot of the counties and local governments across the country have kind of adopted a height limit of 35 feet, has been kind of a standard out there that they posted. And so the information that was provided in your packet just describes some of the data that comes from the Department of Energy, as well as some area counties. And I was kind of amazed to discover that, as we mentioned last month, how maybe ordinances haven't caught up, or maybe rightfully so haven't caught up, looking at other counties where the conditional use permit tends to be the method even with these smaller turbines. And I think what I've seen is people still have a compelling interest on how the appearance of those might be on the respective property. And I think it was mentioned well last month, the height on that has been a concern. If you look at it in terms of how we regulate towers and look at the different fall zones. And so the vast majority of research that we've seen is that they still follow under the conditional use permit procedure, even though you can find those in almost your area, local hardware store at this point. And the page 47, I just gave you an example of, let's see, from the Home Depot, that respective store. You can see they can cost as much as $400 for these, for 400 watt, and there's different ranges, 400 watt up through 1,000 watt. But the interesting part about these in general is how you decide to use them, and I think that's where the conditional use permit comes about. Whether if you move up in power, the debate of whether hooking up to the grid, selling to the grid, or using these as a spot location to power different places on their respective parcels. So at this point in time, I'm going to still look for some more information, more counties to get an idea, but these 4 that were mentioned really jumped out very quickly in terms of showing us how it's managed, how it's used, and I'd like to continue to gauge it to see how many requests come in. If this is going to become a very demanding, where they're permit after permit wanting these on the property, or if we stick with the conditional use permit on a case-by-case basis and monitor it from that. So in the research then, I think I've seen a lot of sensitivity to these. I think people would still scrutinize on the appearance and land.
Appearance and location, when
Yeah.
it's at the fall zone.
Yeah,
Okay,
so that's where,
we're at now. Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for doing that. Okay, ready for the next item then, I'm assuming? Any citizen wishing to be heard, you can hear and see none. Next item is commissioners to comment or inquiries. Anybody? Well, I like to be brief and to the point as much as possible.
She looked very straight Dave when she said that. We were going to give you a chance.
Do you have any comments or
Okay,
inquiries?
so now's your chance. If you want to say something, here it is. It's right here on this agenda. Okay. All right, so meeting adjourned. You want a motion of second?
I can motion that.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, same sign.
See you, Trent.